you join me at a tremendously exciting moment. It's Into Your Head, number 800 and something. I think it's 811 or 812. Note to self, just delete whichever one is wrong. Delete 100. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. I don't need to explain it to you. You're me during the editing process. You have at your fingertips the resources that will tell you whether this is show 811 or 812. So you delete as appropriate. Now, hopefully it's not 810 or 813. Should I just run through all the numbers now and have you delete all of them? That seems like a lot of work, to be honest. Well, we do it anyway. It's Into Your Head, number 810. It's Into Your Head, number 811. It's Into Your Head, number 812. It's Into Your Head, number 813. Now, surely to Christ it can't be any later than 813. I don't think so. I'm pretty sure it's around 811. I think so anyway, or 812. Whatever it is, I think I have it covered now. Unless I'm saving this segment for a later episode. Which, why would I, when the rest of the show is so crap? We're going to need every fucking ounce of material I need. So no, I don't think this is going to be saved away for a future episode. This is going to be a central part of the show. So no, there you go, future self. You sort out that for you. There's a little mess for you to sort out after your Red Bull that I'm still drinking has worn off. You're probably not going to sleep tonight, are you? You're probably not. Well, that's okay, because you have to edit all this crap. It's going to take you hours and 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 hours. And then you'll probably go to bed at some point and try to sleep. And you'll say, I shouldn't have drank all that stuff. You should probably stop drinking it now. It's getting quite late in the afternoon. I'm not going to drink any more of this Monster something. Some sort of monster crap. If it's not working now, drinking any more of it isn't going to do anything. Maybe I'll put some cling film over it and save it for tomorrow. Or save it for a rainy day. What kind of rainy day you'd need where you have Monster Energy drink, I don't know. If it's a rainy day and you're going to stay indoors, cooped up in your house, the last thing you want is a load of fucking caffeine and taurine making your head explode. Oh no. Whatever the opposite of an energy drink is what you keep for a rainy day. Maybe some sleep aids, I don't know. Or maybe just don't arrange your whole life around the weather. How about that? Just because it's a rainy day shouldn't affect you. It's not illegal to go out in the rain, or to do stuff in the rain. You don't have to put everything on hold. I imagine people who have jobs still have to go to work when it's raining. I think I used to, if I remember rightly, I think I used to go to work when it was raining. I think so. I think that was how it worked. And I remember in school, you had to go to school when it was raining, but the day was different. Lunchtime would come around and they'd say, you can stay indoors now. You can stay indoors in the classroom right through lunch and enjoy the novelty of not being able to go outside for an hour. Absolutely ridiculous. That's what it was. So they'd go, look, normally at this point in the day, we tell you, get out of the classroom now. It's compulsory. You're not allowed to stay in the classroom at lunch. Get out into the fresh air. Eat your disgusting boxed sandwich and a little weird plastic flask of tea with milk mixed into it. Then put your flask and your lunchbox down in some corner where you'll have trouble identifying it when the bell rings to go back in. Everyone else has this exact same Spider-Man Ghostbusters flask. Run around the yard for half an hour. But don't play British Bulldog, that's banned. Every few months in the school, someone would start a game called British Bulldog, which apparently was rather controversial. I think it was considered dangerous or something. I think maybe they ate each other's faces off or something. But I never got involved in those games. I would just sit at the side of the yard and just contemplate life with any of the other kids who, sometimes there'd be some kid with a broken leg or something and he wasn't joining in with British Bulldog. And he'd sit there and he'd say, hello. And I'd say, hello, how are you today? And he'd say, I'm just normal. I'm just a normal 8-year-old. I don't know how am I supposed to be? And I'd say, I don't know, but I was just asking how. I think that's how adults talk. They say, how are you today? I think you're supposed to just go, I'm fine, thank you. Or you go, I've got a broken leg. To which I would say, well, that's rather obvious because you're sitting here Well, you're standing here, if you can call it standing. You're propped up on one leg, leaning against the wall, watching the world go by. How old are you now? Are you 8 or 9? And they'll say, well, you're at my 8th birthday party, so you should know how old I am. And I'll say, I suppose I should. Now, I'll have to think about it, though. How long ago was your 8th birthday party? Because if it was more than 50 or 52 weeks ago, that's not going to be helpful, unless I learn how to add, I suppose. How long have I known for you? Well, I suppose I could work this out. I've been going to this school since I was 7, since September of my 7th year. And I was invited to your 8th birthday party. Must have been last year, during the last school year. So if I add a year on to that, figure out, no, you're still 8. I'm pretty sure you're still 8. But look at you, you're a wreck. You're like a 90-year-old. You've a broken leg at 8 years of age. What in the name of Christ are you going to be like by the time you're 11 or 12? You're going to have no legs left. I went to another school after that, and there was a fella there he already had a paralysed leg, which he'd had since he was 6 or 7. We were teenagers at this point. I didn't know that fellow until I was around 12 or 13, but when I met him, he already had destroyed his leg. He'd been hit by a lorry or something. The poor bastard. I understand he went on to become a bus driver. Apparently you can do that now. You can just destroy your leg but still drive buses, because buses are considered, well, that's great. That's absolutely fine with that. We all have our problems and we all get around them. I don't really know what's my point. Oh yes, because I was talking about that fellow who had the broken leg. He was entirely fictional, by the way, but he was about 8 and he already had a broken leg. But what I failed to take account of is the fact that that broken leg almost certainly healed within a few weeks. The other fella, though, by the time he was 8, he had a paralysed leg, and I don't think it was ever fully repaired. By the time I met him around 12, he was still trying to repair it, but they're all going, oh no, that's not a good thing. That's not like, if you break your leg, it grows back. But if you just paralyse your leg, it doesn't just start working again. That doesn't seem reasonable at all. Your leg is just being sitting there still, not moving for a few years. You would think I would give it some rest and then it would get going again. But if you break your leg, that's fucking exhausting. Carrying around a leg with you that's broken, you would think that would be very hard for that to heal, because you're not even getting a rest if you're a child. You're not resting that leg if you're a child. Maybe you're resting the bottom half of it below the break just by dangling it around with you. Does that count? I don't think so. If you have a broken leg and half of it is dangling off you and you're running around still, hopping around, but the bottom half of your leg from below the break is kind of flopping around, hanging off. Is that like your leg relaxed? Is that the equivalent of your leg getting like a little rest, like it's being relaxed, dangling? It's hard to know, really. I suppose it depends on whether you're banging it against things, whether you're scraping your foot against the ground. Well, if your foot's not damaged, you wouldn't worry too much about that. The fellow with the paralysed leg now, that's different, because anything he does with his leg, it gets scraped against everything and it gets damaged, but he goes, oh no, well, it's fucking fucked anyway. Why do I care whether it gets damaged? Well, you should care. It's your leg. Maybe someday they'll fix it, or maybe someday, I don't know, whatever they do to it to enable you to drive a city bus. I don't know. Do they attach a splint to it, but have it so the splint has a hinge at where the knee is? If you're an adventurer and you're out on your own, stranded somewhere out in the desert somewhere, and you break a bone, you make a makeshift splint. You get a stick or something and you tie it to where the bone is. But if that's on your elbow or your... I suppose you'd have to... If you break your leg at the knee or the elbow, does that mean it's flopping around from the knee down? But if you put a splint on that, do you have to have a hinge on the splint so that the splint bends at the knee or the elbow? I don't know. Suppose there's only one way to find out. It would be to look her up in a medical journal of some sort. Not going to look her up from here. Why would I do that? I can't anyway. I'm in the spare bedroom in here. What used to be my mother's room. It's full of crap. But I got rid of loads. Since the last time I mentioned this on the podcast a week or two ago, I've had a good clear out. So I've thrown out a lot of crap from this room. There's still a lot of non-crap. It needs to be organised and put away in an attic. Probably the attic of this house. I suppose it is. You foreigners probably have basements where you live. I have a sibling in America, and he's always going on about his basement. Over here we have attics. You have basements. You Americans are weird about stuff like that. About your house. You have a basement like it's the Oh, the basement is, as far as I'm concerned, the basement is like the toilet of a house. That's where the toilet would be if people weren't obsessed with convenience. We want the toilet to be close to us at all times. So we have an ensuite on every room. You have a toilet on every floor. If you have a bathroom upstairs, you're still expected to have a guest toilet downstairs because God forbid you should have to go up or down a flight of stairs. But no, in a reasonable society, the basement would be where you have all of the toiletry stuff and all of the waste stuff, all of the laundry stuff, and all of that would be in the basement because everything flows down. Everything that's not controlled by energy flows downwards. Gravity controls everything. So you want all the stuff that you want to extinguish from your house should naturally flow down to the basement. And anything valuable should be up in the attic in a safe box or something. And then the people you do while you're living in the space between the basement and the attic. Well, of course, you live in apartments, you don't have basements and attics. So that seems a bit unfair, I suppose. We're living in a world now, especially in this country, where everyone's going to be living in huge blocks of apartments, tiny apartments. They don't have attics or basements, although many of the apartments consist of an attic or a basement, but they don't have attics or basements of their own. I suppose if you're living in a block of flats, you get an apartment that's in the basement. I suppose you could start or offer a service to the other inhabitants of the house. You could say for a small extra rent, you can install a laundry tube or a waste tube or something that goes from your apartment down to my basement apartment, and then I'll deal with it from there. For example, you might want a laundry tube, or you might want your waste flow going out through my apartment. You'd want to pay a substantial fee for that. Although, I suppose, if there's enough separate apartments in the building, all paying a small fee, I suppose that would work. And then if you're the fella in the attic, if you get the apartment in the attic, then you could say, anyone who wants anything to be kept safe, as far away from the outside as possible, I can sell you a safe box, an area of safe box space in my attic apartment. Just like when you used to go to the bank and you'd rent a safe box in the bank. I remember a job I used to be sent down to the bank every month with a backup tape of all the stuff on the computers, and he'd say, bring that in and get the safe box, put that tape in and get the other tape out, and then bring that back. And don't dilly-dally on your way back. Do it like Charlie on the Chocolate Factory, where he says, boy, he goes into a shop and he opens his bar of chocolate and he sees the golden ticket. And he shows it to some customer. He says, boy, you put that in your pocket and run all the way home. That's what used to happen when I was literally the runner, the office boy in an office. And I'd be sent off to the bank every month and they'd say, put the tape in the safe box and then get the other safe box out, last month's safe box tape. And we'll use that as the backup for next month. Get that and come running. Although, now that you mentioned it, if you're bringing it back, the one that I'm bringing back from the bank, that's going to be erased and made the next backup tape. I wouldn't have to worry about that. It's on the outbound trip down to the bank with the current backup tape to store that. That's when you have to be careful about it. Although you wouldn't want to dilly-dally coming back anyway, because people would go, that fella, that runner, office boy fella, the office junior, he seems to spend an awful lot of time getting back from the bank. Is it up at the top? Is it down at the bottom of a hill or something? I don't know. That's what they would say if they noticed, but they didn't, so it was fine. Anyway, on with the show. Into your head. Once upon a time, there was a dog. A dog. A dog. A dog. Basically a dog. Just a dog. Nothing special about her. Nothing, well, there needs to be something special about her if it's going to be featured in a dog story on here, I suppose. Well, we'll figure that out as we go along. All you need to know for now is that once upon a time there was a dog. Wasn't even doing anything. Well, it did lots of things during his life where we're not focusing in on anything that he was doing. We're just saying that once upon a time there was a dog, and that dog existed for some time. We're not going to pinpoint any particular time during its existence. Not even. You're assuming that I will, because that's how you think. You've been conditioned to think that's how stories work. Someone goes, once upon a time there was a dog, and you automatically assume that they're about to say, oh, and at one point during the dog's life the following happens. No, that's the narrative. I didn't say this was going to be a narrative. I suppose I did imply it in a way when I said once upon a time there was a dog. Well, that's just because you assume that's what I'm going to do, because you've heard all these fairy tales that all start with once upon a time, and you think, oh, he's going to say something about something that happened to that dog during its life. That's what you think. Well, I'm not. This isn't fucking Hansel and... even Hansel and Gretel. If you read a Hansel and Gretel story, it might well start with once upon a time, but it doesn't tell you what time that was. It doesn't tell you it was the 1740s or the 1850s or yesterday. No. You've been fooling yourself into thinking that that's about a particular time. It's not. It's not pinpointed at all. They just leave the date unknown. It's a bit like when they have stuff happening in Star Trek. They'll say there was that nuclear war that happens in 1987. Well, then they came back in one of the spin-offs and they say that nuclear war doesn't happen until 2041. And then later on they'll say it'll be 2093. No, you can change that stuff. Well, Hans Christian Andersen and all these people who write the fairy tales, they avoided all that crap by not assigning a time in history to it. You might assume that because it's a fairy story, it's setting a certain time in history. Maybe you imagine there was some age between the Stone Age and the Middle Ages or something. You might imagine that's when all the fairy tale stuff happened. None of that happened. It's a fairy story. None of it happened. It's not real. Not real at all. The book wasn't even published at the time. When Hansel and Gretel came out first, we didn't go into a shop somewhere and say, oh, have you got the new Hansel and Gretel book? Can I have it on paperback and hardback, please? And then can I have the special anniversary edition that's made of sweets? It did not. It wasn't in a book at all. Maybe someone wrote it down somewhere, but no. Well, it's probably just told in front of the fire, the children. The children will be saying, oh, you've had enough television for tonight. And by enough, I mean zero, because television hasn't been invented yet. But also, you've had enough sitting in front of the fire exchanging stories for tonight. So I'll give you a bedtime story now. Be like a little nightcap. You sit down around the fire, children, get into your pajamas, get out of whatever the fuck you've been wearing all day in the Middle Ages, the pre-Middle Age fairy tale era. Now wait a minute, are we in that era or am I just telling you a fairy story from that era? That's the thing. Well, it's both. It's just like nowadays. You can read a story nowadays that's set in the present day. So in the fairy tale era, you could read a story that was set in their present day. It's perfectly normal. Anyway, they'd gather their children around the fire and say, hello, children, here's your bedtime story. Once upon a time, specifically yesterday, although it doesn't say that in the book, because the author has been wise enough not to assign an era to it. But I'm going to say it was yesterday, and then someone 100 years from now who's saying it to their children can say, oh, it was yesterday, their yesterday was 100 years ahead of it. You see, it's flexible that way. Anyway, once upon a time, there was Hansel and there was Gretel, and if I remember rightly, was that the one with the witch, or the old witchy woman who trapped them in a house made of sweets or something and then tried to put them in the oven? I think that's the one. Oh, that's right. They went up to the old house. They started eating her house. And then she started talking about pushing them in the oven or something, I think. And they said, oh, that's a mean old witch. Just because we're eating her house, she wants to fucking burn us and eat us or something. I don't think that's fair. And then Gretel pointed out, well, you have to see it from her point of view. If we had come in here and... No, wait, what am I talking about? No, I mean... she has to see it from our point of view. She probably won't, because she's not one of those people who changes her mind. But the people who are on her side at the moment, listening to the story so far, Hansel, need to see it from our point of view. That's what Hansel says. And she says, the people listening to this should imagine what would happen if we had turned up at the house and not started eating it. Would the witch have treated us any different? And I would say, no, she wouldn't. She'd have still wanted to try and trap us. So don't imagine yourself that, because that's victim shaming. That's what that is. You're saying because we started eating her house, that's the only reason she turned into a child-eating murderess. No, she was going to do that anyway. Then, of course, Hansel, if he'd been a reasonable child and a reasonably well-educated child, and a child, more importantly, a child who'd been taught fairness and objective thinking, he would have said, you don't know that, Gretel. You don't know that at all. You're assuming that woman would be a murderess no matter what we did. But we don't know. We've eaten her house now, so the only proof we have about her is what she would do when her house is eaten, when she's provoked. We've no idea what she would have done if we hadn't provoked her. So you have to be fair like that. And then Gretel will say, why do we have to be fair like that? Are you hoping to get a job as some sort of a public defender or something? Because that's not going to happen if you're baked in a house that you've eaten and put some fucking witch bakes you and kills you. Because you're going to die during that process, you know. Being baked in an oven when you're a child is not something you get out of alive. It kills you. It's very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. You can't really withstand high temperatures for long periods. I don't mean you can't withstand like a 20-degree heat wave. But no, when you're in an oven although were ovens all that hot in those days, they didn't have electric ovens or gas ovens or anything. It's more some sort of a stove. And I suppose it would depend on how much material she had to burn. Was she able to gather enough wood to burn? Or was the wood all made from sweets and chocolate as well? I don't know, because I don't think that stuff burns very well. And isn't chocolate produced by burning? Isn't it made in a saucepan and you kind of burn it and it turns into caramel or something and then it's baked? And then all those baked goods as well, those are all basically already pre-burnt, so there couldn't be much use as fuel for a fire. Although, now that you mentioned it, I don't know. But I'm assuming now that the trees that she's presumably chopping down to put in the fire are made of sweets, and I don't think that's the case. The house is made of sweets because someone made it. Someone didn't make the trees, they grew them from scratch. And you can't grow edible stuff from scratch. Well, except vegetables and drugs, I suppose. There's some types of drugs that you can grow from scratch, I understand. You put them in a glass house or something. Then, of course, you have to make sure the police aren't flying overhead, monitoring the heat from your glass house, because then they'll say, oh, that glass house is warmer than everywhere else around it. That means there's drugs. That's a drugs factory. Let's go down there and have a look. Because then they go down there and have a look, and of course they can't see anything. The only way they're able to see it is from the helicopter. They see areas of heat on a heat map. But when you go down there and just look at it with your own eyes, you can't see heat, so you have no idea where the drugs are. I said drugs are, that was accidental. I wasn't talking about a drugs czar. No, I was just talking about where the drugs are. It's interesting how it comes out like that, though. Anyway, on with the show.
Into your head.
I know what you're thinking there. You're thinking, wait a minute, he started that with once upon a time there was a dog. And then he went off about some Hansel and Gretel thing, and he never got back to the dog thing. He never got back to her. What happened with the dog? Well, the dog just was. Well, that's all. That's the whole story. Once upon a time, a dog was. That's all there is. A dog was, and then there wasn't. I suppose the dog was at one point, and then there came a time when the dog wasn't. But that doesn't mean there's a story to it. The dog just existed, and then it didn't exist. If you want to go back further, I could have started the story earlier and gone, once upon a time there wasn't a dog, and then there was a dog, and then there wasn't a dog again. But there was another dog. And before there was a dog, there was another dog probably. Unless you go back too far to a point when there's no dog. There's no dog. If you go back far enough in time, there's a point where you can start a story where once upon a time there was no dog. There wasn't a dog. There wasn't even... Dogs didn't exist, so there wasn't any dog for there to not be. He can't even say once upon a time there wasn't a dog because, dogs didn't exist. No one was saying, oh, where are all the dogs? Why isn't there a dog? There was no such thing as a dog. And then you go back even further and there just wasn't anything. There was just nothing, absolutely nothing. There was just a bare, vacant bit of space, except there wasn't any space either. There was no space. And that's how these philosophers, they get all tangled up in this crap. They go, once upon a time there wasn't a dog. But also there was nowhere for there to not. We've covered this before. I did several weeks ago, I did a thing about this, about there not being anything. I can't, it's getting rather repetitious. Go just look it up in one of your philosophy books. Suffice to say, once upon a time there was nothing, but there was nowhere for the nothing to be. So there couldn't have been nothing. That's how it is. It's all been proven. Einstein went and he wrote a book about it. He said, hello, once upon a time there was nothing. And then I've calculated that at some point there was something, but I've also calculated that at some point there won't be anything. Or maybe he didn't. I'm just assuming Einstein did that. I'm just assuming. I haven't read his stuff, but I assume there was something along those lines. He's a very clever man. I assume he explained existence and the time before existence and the time before the time when there was existence. And what will happen after existence. I assume he explained all that. Otherwise, why would we be celebrating him everywhere if he didn't manage to explain the meaning of life? I hope there is more to him than just maths, surely. It wasn't just him going around saying, hello, today I've calculated that 4 times 5 is 20. But 5 times 4 is also 20. So that's a problem. That's a problem. 5 times 4 is 20, but 4 times 5 is also 20. How can two things be the same when they're different? It's because you're arranging them in a different way. They shouldn't be different. If I have a dog in here and it's looking over here, that's a dog. But if I have a dog in here and it's looking over the opposite way, it's also a dog. How can they both be a dog? That's 2 dogs. That's ridiculous. Then you had Schrodinger, and nobody knew what the name of Christ he was talking about. Schrodinger was a weirdo, an absolute weirdo. Let's not even go into his cat thing. All I know is one of his famous speeches was made here in Ireland, in Dublin. I don't even know what he said at it. I've never even done him the courtesy of looking into it. Just because he says something while he's in my country, that shouldn't be given extra importance than anything else he says. All I know is he's that weirdo who did the thing with the dead cat and the alive cat. He said, I don't give a fuck if this upsets my cat or if it upsets cat lovers. I'm going to make a big long thing where I say, your cat is in the box and it might be dead or it might not be dead because there's some nuclear thing I've set up. He never mentioned about any sort of safety thing with this. I went to a school once where the original chemistry lab had been burnt down in a fire. And if that can happen in a school where they're just doing a few little basic experiments with pipettes and burettes and stuff, and maybe a bit of dry ice, what the hell can you imagine would happen with Schrodinger with his cat with the nuclear thing? That's highly dangerous. I know it was just a thought experiment, but thoughts are dangerous too. It's thoughts that are what lead to people doing drugs. It's thoughts that are what leads to people starting wars. Thoughts are what lead to people starting all sorts of crap. It all starts as thoughts. And you'd be well to remember that before you listen to Mr. Schrodinger. Now, that doesn't mean Einstein is off the hook, of course, because he was into thoughts as well. He was into thoughts. But at least he didn't go around doing weird stuff with cats. I mean, that was absolute drivel, pure drivel. Look at me, I'm Schrodinger. I'm going to say something about cats now that's weird. No one's ever said it before. I'm going to go up to people in the street and say, how's your cat these days? Do you know? And they'll say, I don't know. I'm going to have to run home and check. You fucking weirdo. You got me all worried about my cat now. No, don't do that to people. People think because you're a scientist or you're a thinker or something, they can just be let off with stuff like that. You say, oh, he's a bit eccentric. He goes around telling people, is your cat dead or alive inside that box with the nuclear thing? No, that's fucking ridiculous. Just as if Einstein turned up here with some other experiment, even if it was nothing to do with cats. And he says, oh, I've got a box here. It's got an atom bomb inside it that may or may not trigger at some point. So there may or may not be something dead or alive in it. I don't know. Let's think about that for the next 50 years, will we? He created a whole genre of thinking about a dead cat. You fucking weirdo. A whole genre of thinking about a dead cat who may also have been an alive cat. So it's two genres of thinking. There's been reams and reams of books written about this. You look up by your library now, and there's about 12 books just about Schrodinger's cat thing. And most of them are saying, oh, look, this fella came up with this hilarious cat analogy. Isn't hilarious? It's not. It's not hilarious. It's disgusting. Schrodinger was a scumbag. He was a scumbag. You'd be well to remember that. Anyway, on with the show. Two cats walk into a bar. One of the cats goes straight up to the bar counter and says, hello, can I have a pint of your finest Guinness, please? And the man behind the bar says, certainly. Would you like a full pint or would you like me to leave room for the head? And the cat says, I beg your pardon. And the man behind the bar says, I was just saying, would you like a full pint of it? Or would you like me to leave some room for the head? And the cat says, what in the name of Christ is this? Is this a new thing now? I have to instruct you on what way to construct my Guinness. You're the bartender. You're supposed to know what's the right way to do it. And the man behind the bar says, firstly, I'm not a bartender. This isn't America. I'm the barman. There's no bartenders here. There's nothing tender about what I do here. As you're about to find out if you keep up this line of questioning or line of assault on me, whatever you call it. I'm not a bartender. There's going to be no tenderness here. And the cat says, I think it's called bartender because you tender stuff. Someone tenders money towards you and you tender their drink towards them. It's nothing to do with being tender. And the barman says, well, that doesn't make any sense. You tender me a €5 note, so I'm called a bartender. No, I should be the bartenderee, if anything, then. I'm like the payee, not the payer. I'm being paid, so I'm being tendered. So I'm the tenderee, if anything. Those Americans who call people like me tenders are absolute morons. No offense to any Americans listening. If you're an American listening to this, don't worry, it's not about you. It's about whoever invented the phrase bartender. It's not about you at all. Don't go taking it personally. For one thing, there's about 100 million Americans. The chance of it being about you are about 1 in 100 million. Don't get your knickers in a twist over it. And the man behind the bar says, what in the name of Christ was that? And the cat says, I don't know. All I know is you're a bartenderee. That's what you are. And the man behind the bar says, I believe I just explained that to you. And the cat says, well, you explained it very well because I'm repeating it now as if it's my own thought. So well done to you. Have you ever considered becoming an educator? And the barman says, well, I do trade lounge boys here, or whatever we're supposed to call them. The kids who come in here and work for me and go around picking up glasses off the tables and putting them in the dishwasher and then mopping up all the vomit and puke and piss and Guinness that's all over the place at the end of the night. And all that sort of thing. I train them in. Now, I say I train them. I don't have them following me around with a mop, watching me mop up the piss. No. I'll get them to do that. On the job training, I say, do that. And then I'll correct you on anything you're doing wrong. That mop should be going counterclockwise. You're not in fucking Melbourne or somewhere. I suppose in a way I am an educator. In a way, I suppose. I am an educator. And of course, I educate people about fine wines. When they come in here and say, I'd like a glass of wine, what would you recommend? And I educate them about asking someone who's there to make money out of them what they recommend. I'm going to recommend either the most expensive wine available, or if they look poor, I'll recommend whatever I'm trying to get rid of that nobody's buying. I'll get some crap from the wine cellar. And then the wine cellar will come back and give me more crap the next week. I'll have to flog off to someone else. I should probably be a bit more selective in what I buy from the wine cellar. I mean, for one thing, I'm supposed to be an expert in this stuff. I am the bartenderee after all. I should know this stuff. But then it's not a wine bar, is it? I don't think it is anyway, is it? If it was a wine bar, would a cat be coming in here asking for a pint of my finest Guinness? He would not. At best, he'd say, "Can I have a pint of your house stout, please?" Because it was a wine bar here. The menu was all various types of exotic wines. If it was a wine bar, I'd only have one type of beer, maybe two at most. I'd have a lager and I'd have a house stout. Maybe I'd have a house ale as well. If I'm not sure if that's a different thing from a stout or or it was just something I pick up from soap operas from England. They come in and they say, "Can I have a pint of beer, please?" And the bar person usually doesn't even answer that. They don't even say any particular brand name. No, they just hand them a big thing of beer. Could be anything. Could be a pint of piss for all we know. Although it probably isn't. We're in an era now where actors go on strike if they don't get what they want. If they start making the actors in these soap operas drink pints of piss, or there'd be eruptions at some point. They'd come along saying, "Now look at, we tolerated cutting pay and we tolerated you replacing us all with AI actors from robots making movies out of us when we're dead using our AI equivalents. We're not going to tolerate pretending to drink piss. No. If we're going to be asked to drink piss on a soap opera set, at least give us something that looks like piss, not something that is piss. If you want us to portray, we're actors. We can convince the viewer that we're drinking piss without actually drinking piss. That's why you pay us for it. That's why we go to acting school, so we can portray that. So no. None of that piss waffle. I've been putting up some very old episodes of this podcast up on the website under the category of vintage crap or something like that. I think I called it vintage IYH or something. Some vintage episodes from the mid 2000s, and one of them was called something like Stroop Waffle. I think I did something about a rule from the Netherlands said something about Stroop Waffles being a thing, and then I think I made like 2 episodes out of this because I went to Belgium. I did a podcast from a thing in Belgium in a hotel. And then that was a different one. That wasn't the Stroop Waffles thing at all. I'm confusing myself. So there's been at least 3 episodes of this podcast from the early days that revolve around Belgium stuff. 2 of them were in Belgium, in Bruges, in a hotel room. Then one later, I think, was called Stroop Waffles, because this rule fella said something about Stroop Waffles somewhere. Those were the days. Someone could say Stroop Waffles to me in a forum somewhere. It probably wasn't even in my own podcast site. It's probably somewhere else. This fella, Rule from the Netherlands, I think he said something somewhere about Stroop Waffles, and I made a fucking podcast about it. That's how it used to be in the early days of this branch of entertainment. Someone could say something in a forum somewhere, and you'd be inspired and you say, "I'm going to get out my 2007 voice recorder and start recording. I'm just going to say, 'Hello, Stroop Waffles, something. And then I get about 20 minutes out of it, and that was a show in those days. It was absolutely fucking fantastic. Well, not that fantastic, obviously. That's why I'm hiding them in some back page of my website. Oh no, those were terrible days for this podcast. The early days of this podcast are unlistenable. If you ever go try and listen to them, I'm going to disown you. Don't listen to that crap. Have some dignity, for Christ's sake. There's 2,500,000 podcasts available now. You don't need to keep going digging into the depths of the stuff I did 18 years ago. That's just beneath you. Beneath me, and it should be beneath you as well. Should be beneath us all. It should be buried in the graveyard cemetery of podcasts. Not that I'm ashamed of them. No, those were where I honed my craft. I learned how to make. I sit out in a garden somewhere in the old house, down in the south end of the arse end of County Kildare, in a place called Athy. I go outside on a hot day with a dog and a cat and a portable voice recorder, and I usually sit on the ground admiring the grass that I just cut, because there was a new homeowner then. It was still exciting to have a lawn to cut. A few years later, I thought, fucking hell, this lawn. I rue the day I ever bought a house with a lawn. I sold that house a few years ago. someone else's problem now. They have to cut the grass. The rest, I don't know. It's a fine house, but it has grass. You don't want a house with grass. This new house I live in now has no grass. Absolutely no grass at all, although it does have weeds. Nobody told me you can have weeds that just grow up from under the concrete everywhere. Don't even have a garden as such. We have weeds everywhere. About 20 years ago, everybody started having low maintenance gardens. They covered everything in concrete. And then someone apparently seems to have invented a new type of weed that grows there. I don't mean the type of weed you're thinking, the illegal one. What's it called? The hashish or the cannabis. That's a drug. No, I'm not talking about drugs. Drugs don't grow up through cracks in your pavement. If they didn't, I wouldn't be paying a fella to come and spray them and get rid of them. No, I'd be carefully picking them up one by one. I'd be putting them in a Tupperware tub, and then I'd be marching down to my local police station and turning them in. I'd say, Officer, Garda, whatever we're supposed to call you here, this thing has been growing in my driveway. I wanted to clear it. I didn't grow on purpose. I'm not surrendering it here. I'm just showing it to you. No, you can't have it. You can take a photograph of it though. I just want to register the fact that this grew in my garden. And it wasn't me. I want to register the fact that it wasn't me. It just grew naturally. So yes, I'm going to take it home now and I'll store it away in the attic somewhere in a tub. Just like you keep old credit card bills and things like that. You need to archive that stuff just in case you have some legal, just in case 5 years later someone comes up and says, hello, sir, I'd like to arrest you for being in possession of drugs at the Garda station 5 years ago. And I'll say, no, I think you'll find I came in and reported that those drugs had accidentally grown in my garden beyond my control. And then I came in and showed them to you. And of course the guard will say, yes, but he didn't surrender them to us. He just said, you can take a photo of that now if you want. And then you said, I'm going to go home and bring this home with me. And I'll say, that's right. I brought them home with me and I filed them away in my filing system. Just like with the tax people, you're supposed to keep your tax records for several years. You don't just throw them out or hand them over to the cops. No, you file them away. I have a filing system. Anything new that comes in, I just scan it. If anyone needs to see this, I have a scan of it somewhere on my computer that I can send to them. Because I don't read stuff off paper anymore. It's too blurry. I just scan everything. I go, phone, read this thing to me, and then send the text by email to me so I can have a look at it on a proper screen. And then I just stuff the thing in a folder somewhere. There's no point filing stuff. I know this is the opposite of what I was saying earlier, that you should file stuff. You should file everything away for years. But no, I've changed my mind now. What I should have done if I had been that fictional version of me who found drugs growing between the cracks in my pavement and brought them down to the cop shop, I should have said, no, I'm not going to file this away, but I'm not going to give it to you either. I'm going to put it beyond use. I'm going to do what the IRA did when they had that cessation of violence that they didn't want to call a ceasefire. They said, we're going to put our arms beyond use. And then everyone else said, well, can we see you putting them beyond use? Can we watch you pouring concrete over them or something and burying them under Mount Everest? And then the IRA says, well, if we bury them under Mount Everest, I don't think that's going to be helpful, because if we're able to bury them under a mountain, surely we can retrieve them from under a mountain. By burying them under Mount Everest, we'll have literally proved we have the means to move mountains. And that's going to ruin the credibility of people who want to see that we've put our military terrorism arms beyond use, which is part of the peace agreement. We need to prove that we put them beyond use. No, we bury them under a mountain. Everyone's going to know they are able to bury that under a mountain, which means they can move a mountain, again to retrieve them. And then the unionists who were the other side of the peace agreement, they said, they've got a good point there, the IRA. They've a good point. You know, we disagree with a lot of what the IRA says and does, but they have a good point there about the mountains. I think it was Ian Paisley said that. One of the more vocal leaders of the Ulster Unionist parties. One of the Ulster Unionist parties during the 1990s. Ian Paisley was this fella who used to shout a lot. He'd come around and say, no. Ulster says no. no, 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 but also yes. And then at some point he went off for a while, and the other party went and did a deal. And then the other party went away because their voter said, no, fuck you, you did a deal, we don't want you anymore. And then your man came back in and said, oh, I'm here now, I'm the fellow who said no, vote me in. And then he got voted in and he said, oh, I'm going to hold hands with the fella from the IRA now and I'm going to look great. I'm going to get the Nobel Peace Prize. I can't remember if he got the Nobel Peace Prize or not. Someone did. Someone got it. They made the two of them share it. Two people in Northern Ireland from different sides. They say, we're going to share the Nobel Peace Prize between you, the two of you. We can't put down on the thing saying which side was the more peaceful, because that's undiplomatic. You would cause the diplomatic incident with something like that. If the Nobel Peace Prize Committee came along and said, now we have to judge which side was more deserving of a Nobel Peace Prize, was it them or them? Because the whole point of a fucking peace prize is that you make peace, not that you're still fighting over who did the more peace stuff. No. Anyway, Northern Ireland is all fine now. I assume it is anyway. Back in those days in the 1990s, I used to be a news junkie. I used to follow all the peace talks and the Good Friday Agreement negotiations and all of that. But then someone invented podcasts. Then I got my news radio and I threw it in the bin. And then I listened to podcasts and audiobooks then for the rest of my life to date. So I assume it's still peace up there, but I don't listen to the news anymore, so I don't know. Unless it comes up on a podcast, which is the type of podcast I listen to, it's unlikely to come up. Well, except this one, apparently. And it's unlikely to come up on this podcast, too. I don't think I've even mentioned Northern Ireland in this podcast ever before. That's how unlikely it is to come up. Oh, come up it has now. I'm not going to be able to listen back to this episode. It's not my sort of thing. I've no interest in news anymore. And as far as I'm concerned, news is old news. I listened to enough news in my 20s. That's what you should do, you know. If there's something you don't like doing, like listening to the news, do it so much early on in your life that you don't feel the need to do it anymore. You ruin your appetite for it. Same with drugs. If you're worried that you might have an addictive personality and that you might become a drug addict, maybe because your parents were alcoholics or something, or there's a lot of it in your family, or you just find yourself getting addicted to things quite easily. Well, the thing to do there is spend your early 20s doing loads and loads and loads and loads of drugs. Get addicted to heroin and crack cocaine and a whole lot of it, and do so much that you get absolutely sick to death of it. You've had your fill. You get it all out of your system, all the heroin and everything else. Inject it into your veins. Go up to the drug dealer and say, I love this fucking heroin. Inject it. I want to inject it literally into my veins. And they'll say, yes, I know. That's how you take heroin. You inject it into your veins. And you say, I know, but I was saying it as a saying. It's like when people say, I like Cocoa Pops injected right into my veins. Well, I feel the same way about heroin. You say that to your drug dealer and they'll say, that's fine. Now, I'm not going to inject it for you. I'm not your nurse. You have to do that yourself. But I'll sell you the appropriate equipment and the supplies. Have you got some money? And you'll say, well, I did have some money, yes. I seem to have spent it all on drugs. So, do you know anywhere I could steal some money? Or could I just steal some heroin from you? Would that work? And the heroin dealer will say, well, one of those two ideas might work, but not the other one. I wouldn't recommend stealing it off me, because then that's going to turn into a big gangland feud. And even if you manage to get over your heroin addiction, you'll still be left with this big thing where it's all tit for tat for the rest of your life. It's all every time you kill someone and get rid of one of your old drug debts, someone else comes along and kills you, and then you have to go and do it. Your family has to get revenge for that, and then their family has to get revenge for revenge. It's never ending. That's the problem with drugs. It's not the addiction to this stuff that you put in your veins. That stuff's easy. That's just a matter of getting your doctor to sort you out. But it's all the killing afterwards. You know, everyone ends up dead. They all end up dead as a doornail, not from drugs. Well, they would end up dead from drugs if the people murdering them hadn't got there first. I suppose in a way you could say that by selling someone drugs, you're effectively murdering them indirectly. I suppose. So I suppose really I shouldn't be recommending this getting into... I had started earlier in this segment, I was recommending that you take up drugs in your 20s and get it out of your system, have your fill of it. Just like I did with my news junkie thing. In my 20s, I listened to news all the time. Well, I say all the time. I had a job. I didn't listen to news at work. I did have a long commute, so I listened to news all the way in on the bus. And all the way home on the bus, I listened to this fella and he say, "Hello, this is the news. We're going to talk to a fella about this. Hello, Ian Paisley, is it?" And Ian Paisley would come on the phone and he'd say, "No, it is not. No, no, no." And then the other fellow would say, "Yes, it is you though, Mr. Paisley. I know you have a reputation and a brand that consists of saying no to everything. Well, it is your name, isn't it?" And then Ian Paisley had to get around that by naming his son Ian Paisley Jr. so he could get rid of the name. Unfortunately, he still had that name himself. Even after he died, his name is still Ian Paisley. I think Ian Paisley Jr. just goes by Ian Paisley now, though. I wonder, does he have a son? Because that would be Ian Paisley's son's son, so he'd be Ian Paisley the third. I don't know. Why do people reuse their names? It's fucking ridiculous. Get a new name. There's no reason to be giving someone the same name that's being... No name should be used more than once in 100 years in any single jurisdiction. It should be against the law. You have a registry of deaths and births and marriages. It should be perfectly possible to vet these names. When you say, "I'm going to name my child John," you should have to put it on the form that you submit to the Register of Births, and they get back a thing back saying, "There's too many Johns already. There has been at least one John in this constituency in the last 100 years. The name will become available again in approximately 2071. And of course, the problem with that is people will say, "How in the name of God do you know the exact date that the name will become available again? So you know when there's one John in the country at the moment and you figured out you know the exact date at which you'll die, is that it?" And they'll say, "Well, no, although we will at the time, because we're, as well as being the Register of Births, we're also the Registry of Deaths. So that'll be registered with us." But no, that's not really what we mean by that. What we mean by that is that we allow one person to be registered in the name John every 100 years. It doesn't necessarily mean that it becomes available on the day that the current John dies. The current John could be 107 and we will still let someone else, one more person, use the name on the 100th anniversary of that John being registered as John. Now, whether it's done on the anniversary of the day he was registered as John or the anniversary of his physical birth, I'm not sure. Because there's ways that could be circumvented. You could call someone John but not register his birth until he's about 107. So you could register John's son as John and then go along and say, "Oh, this fella, my father's name is John. It just hasn't been registered yet." And somehow you could get away with that, I suppose. Or could you? I don't know. You should be allowed to register your birth and your death at the same time. You should be allowed to put everything off until, or else do it early. When you're born, your parents should be allowed to pre-register your death along with your birth. You get a birth certificate and a death certificate. Of course, some of the details will be left blank on the death certificate, and then when they come along to pronounce you dead, and then someone else comes along to pronounce your cause of death, you hand a little form to the doctor and he says, "Oh, I just fill in the blanks here. Is that right? That's great. And then what?" And you go, "And then nothing, because we registered the death 80 years ago, so there's nothing more to do." I know it's a bit hyper-prepared of us, but the last thing you want to be doing, as I found after someone dies, is going around having to register things. So do it all in advance. Be prepared. That's what you do. That's what you should do. Be prepared. Isn't that great? I've been talking for 27 minutes and 32 seconds. Isn't that fantastic? In fact, I've been talking for longer than that, but the first segment didn't work out. There was something about a barbad and wine. I think I was saying, I won't go into it now. If it didn't work then, it's hardly going to work out now. That would be ridiculous. Anyway, good morning. Anyway, good morning. Anyway, good morning. Anyway, good morning. Anyway, good morning.